Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming your way. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I want to know how far this story has reached. No more waiting. Let's get into the video.
The desert of Varun IV stretched endlessly beneath a sky the color of molten copper. Dunes rolled like frozen waves, and the air shimmered with heat so fierce that even the metal skeletons of ancient mining rigs cracked under its weight. Nothing survived long here. Nothing, except the Luthari who had once built their cities in the canyons beyond the desert, and who now used this wasteland as their cruelest form of exile. Syra lay broken on the sand, her limbs heavy and useless. The once proud dancer of the Luthari clans, whose movements had been described as starlight flowing through flesh, was now discarded like an old relic. Her legs had stopped responding after the fall, a staged accident, though she had not yet accepted it as such. Her clan had whispered words of honor, of tradition, of mercy as they left her there. But Syra knew the truth. They abandoned her because she was now a burden. The sand clung to her pale, opalescent skin, dulling the faint glimmer that still pulsed in her veins. Hunger gnawed at her. Thirst burned like fire in her throat. Her third eyelid flickered shut and open, trying to keep the grit away, but she was too weak even to brush it aside. The desert carried no sound except the hiss of the wind. She had expected her death to come in silence, without witness, without song, until she heard footsteps. At first she thought it was a mirage, her dying mind inventing the rhythm of survival, but the sound grew heavier, real, deliberate. A shadow fell across her, blotting out the copper sky. She forced her head to rise, every tendon screaming, and through the haze of dust she saw him, a man of angular features, skin darkened by sun and war, wrapped in a tattered diplomatic uniform. A human, Kael riven. He crouched beside her, his breath rough, his eyes a storm gray that searched not with disdain, but with alarm. The humans were newcomers to Varun IV, emissaries who walked carefully between clans, always unwelcome yet always persistent. Kael was one of them, though his bearing carried the weight of old scars, soldiers' scars. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with urgency. Her lips cracked as she tried to speak. The sound that came out was more sigh than word. "Left. Behind." Kael's gaze flicked across her body, noting the way her legs lay limp in the sand, the faint tremor in her hands. He swore under his breath. He knew the traditions of the Luthari, or at least enough to understand what this meant. She had been condemned not by enemy fire, but by her own kin. Every rule of his mission told him to walk away. This was their custom, their law. To interfere was to break fragile diplomacy. But Kael had lived too long with rules written by the powerful at the expense of the powerless. He could not look at her and see only a dying alien. He saw someone discarded, someone who had been told her life was no longer worth the effort, and that was something he could never accept. He slipped his arms beneath her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. Her head fell against his chest, and for the first time in days, she felt warmth not from the sun, but from another living being. The steady beat of his heart against her cheek was alien, yet comforting. She wanted to tell him not to bother, that she was finished, but the words would not come. Kael looked out across the burning horizon. He had no plan, no allies, no guarantee that saving her wouldn't doom them both, but he did know one thing. He could not let her die here. "Hold on," he whispered, adjusting his grip as he began to walk. "You're not done yet." The desert wind rose behind them, erasing the traces of her abandonment. And for the first time since the fall, Syra allowed herself to close her eyes without surrendering. Someone had chosen her life over the law. Someone had seen her not as a burden, but as worth carrying. It was a single act of compassion. Yet in that moment, as the sun bled into twilight and the sand cooled under their feet, the universe shifted. Neither of them knew it, but what began there, in the silence of Varun IV's desert, was the spark of a revolution. The safe house was hidden in the underbelly of Varun IV's only neutral port, a ramshackle station clinging to the cliffs above the desert like a dying insect. Its corridors smelled of ozone and rust, the tang of recycled air and the sour stench of desperation. Refugees, smugglers, and broken soldiers drifted through its shadows, but none paid attention to Kael riven as he carried the fragile form of Syra deeper into its maze. He found Elias Thorne in a back room lit by humming lanterns. Once a respected field surgeon for the Terran Defense Corps, Elias had abandoned his commission years ago after crossing lines no officer dared admit existed. Now he survived by patching up those who had nowhere else to go. His hands, though scarred, were steady as Kael lowered Syra onto a cot lined with torn synth fabric. "Another stray," Elias muttered, adjusting the crude scanner over her limp legs. "You've been out of the service too long, Kael. Compassion makes poor armor." Kael ignored the barb, his eyes fixed on Syra's face. "Can you help her?" Elias frowned as the readings flickered across his tablet. Nerve pathways dead, spinal lattice fractured beyond standard repair. Yet beneath the data something shimmered, anomalous energy spikes that made the scanner sputter. He leaned closer. "Interesting," Elias whispered. "Very interesting." Syra stirred, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The Luthari were known for their subtle iridescence, but this was brighter, more alive, like threads of starlight woven beneath her skin. Kael noticed it too. "Her body's shining," he said, voice low with disbelief. "It's not illness," Elias murmured. "It's transformation." Syra's breathing grew ragged, and suddenly her hand shot out, gripping Kael's wrist with a strength she should not have possessed. A pulse traveled through him, electric and warm, spreading across his arm like fire beneath the skin. He gasped, and she echoed the sound, as though the same sensation had struck her at the same instant. Elias's eyes widened. "By the void, Kael, you're the trigger. Her genome is resonating with yours." Syra's voice was a whisper, tremulous but insistent. "The descent, that's what they called it, when one of us changes. But they said it was myth. No one survives it." Elias shook his head. "Not myth, mutation. The Luthari called it descent, but in my records it's known as the awakening. Rare, dangerous, but it doesn't happen alone. It requires a catalyst, someone who pulls the dormant patterns to the surface." He stared at Kael. "That catalyst is you." Kael felt her grip tighten, her skin fever-hot against his. His instinct screamed to pull away, but something deeper anchored him there, as though leaving her would sever something vital inside himself. Their breaths synchronized without intent, two beings locked in a rhythm older than language. "You saved me," Syra whispered. "Now my body remembers. It's rewriting itself." Kael's throat tightened. He had seen mutation on battlefields, but never like this. Never something that shimmered with beauty instead of horror. He brushed a strand of dust-matted hair from her face. "Then we face it together." Elias cleared his throat sharply. "Together or not, the process will accelerate. She'll burn brighter, and your enemies will notice. Her clan won't let this stand. If they find her alive, like this." His voice trailed into grim silence. Syra's eyes closed as another tremor seized her body. But this time, when she exhaled, the glow spread outward, painting the walls in rippling light. Kael caught her as her strength faltered, feeling the heat seep into his own veins. For a fleeting moment, his vision blurred, and he saw stars not through his own eyes, but through hers. He felt the pulse of her alien heart as if it were his own. He pulled back, breath ragged. "What's happening to me?" "Bonding," Elias said. "Biological, neurological, maybe even deeper. Your DNA is responding to hers. You're becoming part of her metamorphosis." The words settled heavy in the room. Kael stared down at Syra, who clung weakly to his hand, as though terrified that if she let go, the light would vanish. Desire and fear warred within him, but beneath them lay something undeniable, a connection neither diplomacy nor war had ever prepared him for. For the first time since the desert, Syra's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "You carried me when I could not walk," she murmured. "Now, perhaps we will learn to rise together." Outside the safe house, the desert wind howled like a warning, and far beyond the cliffs, unseen eyes turned toward the glow that should not have been possible, watching, calculating, preparing. The awakening had begun. The first signs of pursuit arrived not in sound, but in silence. The port's constant murmur of voices, engines, and commerce seemed to dim, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Kael felt it before he saw it, the stillness of a battlefield just before the ambush. He and Syra had been moving cautiously through the forgotten tunnels beneath the station, her glow dimmed only by the stabilizers Elias had concocted from scavenged sedatives. But even diluted, her bioluminescence leaked through her skin, pulsing softly with every beat of her heart. In darkness, she was a beacon. In hiding, she was a curse. "They're close," Kael whispered, pressing her gently into the shadow of a corroded bulkhead. Syra's eyes, luminous pools of silver, met his. "My clan," she said softly, and the word carried both recognition and betrayal. "They sent hunters. They should have let me die. But not like this." "Not shining." Kael tightened his grip on his rifle. "Why chase their own?" Her lips trembled. "Because I survived what I was never meant to. The fall wasn't an accident, Kael. They pushed me. To be broken is one thing, but to change." She shivered. "To awaken is forbidden." From the shadows ahead, the faint shimmer of cloaking veils rippled. Luthari hunters, their movements precise, their silence predatory. Kael pulled Syra behind him, adrenaline surging. "Doctor." Elias and Parker, the station guard who had reluctantly joined them, rounded the corner. Parker's helmet visor gleamed with sweat despite the cold air. "Tracks everywhere," he hissed. "They're tightening the noose. We can't outsneak them. We need distance." Kael scanned the map on his wrist display. "Distance means open ground. She'll light up the desert like a star." Syra winced, her body convulsing briefly as another wave of energy rolled through her veins. Even through the stabilizers, the awakening was accelerating. Thin fractures of light traced her skin like constellations. "It's worse when I try to hold it in," she admitted. "The light, it wants to be free. The more I fight it, the more it burns," Elias muttered under his breath. "A living flare against predators that hunt in shadow. Convenient for them." Suddenly, a voice sliced through the silence, carried by the comms of the hunters and deliberately left unencrypted. "Syra of the Luthari. Surrender, and the shame ends quickly. Resist, and even your bones will not be remembered." The name behind the voice struck Syra like a blade. "Velthar," she whispered, trembling. "He was the one who declared me unworthy. Now he hunts me himself." Kael felt her grip tighten on his sleeve. He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Then he knows you're more than they fear to admit." The hunters advanced. Shadows lengthened as their cloaks shimmered, trying to blend into the darkness. But Syra's body betrayed them, or perhaps protected her. Her glow suddenly surged, uncontrolled, washing the tunnel walls in silver blue light. The hunters froze, their outlines revealed in stark silhouette. "Move!" Kael barked, firing a burst that forced the nearest figures back. Parker dropped smoke charges, the air filling with acrid haze. Elias dragged Syra to her feet, though her legs wavered under her, trembling between weakness and something new. The escape was chaos. Bolts of searing plasma cut through the smoke, sparking against walls. Kael shoved Syra forward, shielding her with his own body. The ground shook as hunters dropped from higher vents, but their cloaks flickered uselessly in Syra's radiance. She was no longer hidden prey. She was a flame that burned away their shadows. By the time they burst into the open desert night, the stars themselves seemed to answer her glow. Her skin shimmered like a mirror of the heavens. Kael steadied her, his breath ragged. "You can't stop it anymore, can you?" Syra's tears glistened as light traced her cheeks. "I am a beacon, Kael, and beacons are seen." Far across the dunes, more cloaked figures shimmered into sight. A net of hunters, tightening, relentless. Kael's rifle felt too small against the weight of inevitability, but when he looked at her, burning with light even in exhaustion, he knew retreat was no longer possible. They were not merely fleeing now. They were being driven toward something larger, toward confrontation. The silent hunt had ended. The war of revelation had begun. The mining station loomed like the bones of a dead titan, half buried in the sands of Varun IV. Rusted girders jutted into the night sky. Hollow shafts plunged into the earth where once the Luthari had clawed for ore. Now it was abandoned, a graveyard of industry, and the last refuge for Kael, Syra, Elias, and Parker. They barricaded themselves inside the central chamber, overturned machinery forming makeshift cover. The air smelled of oil, scorched metal, and fear. Parker checked his rifle with shaking hands. Elias wired detonators across the entryways, his eyes grim. Kael stood beside Syra, watching her struggle against the stabilizer syringe Elias pressed into her arm. She pushed his hand away. "No more sedatives," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. "If I dim the light, we die unseen. But if I shine, maybe we live." Her skin already pulsed with energy, the veins of light running brighter, faster. Kael touched her shoulder, feeling the warmth radiate into his bones. "It could kill you." Syra's eyes locked on his, steady despite the tremor in her frame. Better to burn for something than to fade for nothing. Before Kael could reply, the walls shuddered with impact. A concussive blast echoed through the chamber. The hunters had arrived. Velthar's voice boomed through the comms, cold and commanding. "The exile burns like a torch in the dark. Snuff it out. Leave no witness." The barricades rattled as plasma bolts hammered against them. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the air. Parker returned fire, his shots cracking like thunder. Elias triggered the first charge, collapsing part of the entryway and buying a moment's reprieve. But shadows still poured through the gaps. Hunters cloaked in armor, their eyes glinting like knives. Syra staggered forward, her glow intensifying until it filled the chamber like dawn breaking inside stone walls. The hunters faltered, their sensors blinded by the flood of radiance. Kael felt the heat rise in waves, his vision blurring, but when he looked at her, he saw not weakness, but transcendence. Velthar stepped through the smoke, tall and imposing in armor engraved with clan sigils. His voice cut through the chaos. "You shame us all, Syra. You should have died silent. Instead, you scream with light." Syra lifted her head, her body trembling as if it were a vessel too small for the storm inside. "I am not ashamed," she said, her voice echoing with unnatural resonance. "I am proof that your laws are cages, and cages were made to be broken." The hunters hesitated. For the first time, doubt rippled through their ranks. Velthar raised his blade staff high, fury twisting his features. "Then I will break you myself." He lunged. Kael fired, bolts sparking harmlessly off Velthar's shimmering shield. The commander bore down on Syra, weapons slicing arcs of lethal light. Kael threw himself between them, the blade grazing his armor, sending a shock through his ribs. Syra cried out, catching Kael before he fell. And then she let go. The stabilizer's dam broke. Her glow erupted in a blinding wave, flooding every shadow of the chamber. Hunters screamed, their cloaks dissolving, their armor systems frying under the radiance. Velthar staggered back, shielding his eyes as cracks of light seared across his weapon. Kael, half blinded, clung to Syra's arm. The light didn't burn him. It enveloped him, threads of energy weaving into his veins, his heart pounding in rhythm with hers. He felt stronger, steadier, as if her awakening was pouring into him, binding them tighter than blood. Parker stared in awe, lowering his weapon. Elias shielded his face, shouting above the storm of brilliance. "She's rewriting the rules of biology itself." Outside, the night sky erupted with the roar of engines. Ships descended, not just human patrol craft, but alien vessels bearing unfamiliar insignia. Their hatches opened, and figures emerged. Other hybrids, other pairs of human and alien bonded in impossible ways, their eyes glowing with the same defiant light. The revelation was undeniable. Syra was not alone. Velthar, blinded and staggering, hissed in rage. "You'll tear our people apart." Syra's voice rang like a bell across the chamber. "No, we will bind them together." With that, she stepped forward, radiant as a star, and the hunters, once executioners, could do nothing but bow their heads against the brilliance. The council chamber of the interstellar Concord was carved from black glass that seemed to drink the starlight pouring through the vast dome above. Delegates of dozens of species filled the tiers, their voices rising in overlapping tones of outrage, disbelief, and fear. The name Syra echoed in every tongue, carried across the chamber like both a warning and a promise. At the center dais, Syra stood, no longer broken, no longer carried. She stood tall, her steps measured, her body shimmering with the quiet pulse of her new light. The paralysis that had once condemned her was gone. Her legs moved with strength, her bearing proud. The transformation had not only healed her, it had remade her. Kael stood at her side, armored not in metal but in conviction. The The soldier-turned-diplomat watched as eyes from across the galaxy fixed upon Syra, some wide with awe, others narrowed with hostility. Elias lingered nearby, acting as reluctant witness, and Parker kept to the shadows, his rifle slung but ready. The tribunal had been convened after Syra and Kael delivered proof. Recordings of Velthar's betrayal, documents detailing the Luthari Council's selective executions, testimonies from hybrids who had hidden their existence in silence. Now, the truth was no longer shadow but flame. "Order!" the presiding arbiter demanded, slamming her staff against the stone floor. The chamber quieted, her multifaceted eyes fixed on Syra. "You claim your exile was not a sentence of mercy but a crime of silencing. What evidence do you bring?" Syra's voice rose, not pleading but resolute. "I was cast out because I was broken, but when I awakened, they feared what I represented. Not weakness, change. And change, to them, is death. So they sought to erase me. They failed. And now you all see the truth." She gestured, and the holographic displays flared to life, the chamber filled with images, hunters ambushing her, Velthar's voice declaring her unworthy, the glow of her awakening cutting through their cloaks. Then, one by one, others appeared, human-alien pairs stepping forward, revealing themselves, eyes glowing, hands intertwined. They were not anomalies. They were a generation. A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber, some horrified, some moved. A Luthari elder rose from the tiers, his scales dull with age but his voice sharp. "These bonds are aberrations. They break the laws of blood and tradition. If we allow them, what becomes of what we are?" Syra met his gaze without flinching. "What you are is afraid. You fear not the loss of our identity, but the loss of your control. You claim to protect our people, yet you cast out those who do not fit your mold. That is not protection. It is genocide in the name of order." The chamber erupted again. Some shouted in agreement, others in fury. The arbiter's staff cracked against the floor once more. "Enough. The council will deliberate." Hours passed like lifetimes. Outside, Kael paced the marble hallways, his hand brushing the cold walls as though grounding himself. Syra sat in silence, her glow dimmed but steady, her fingers entwined with his. At last, the doors opened. The arbiter returned to the dais, her voice echoing across the chamber. "The conquered recognizes the crimes of the Luthari High Council. Velthar and 3 elders are hereby stripped of rank. Their traditions of selective exile are abolished. In their place, we recognize a new era, one where union across species is not a crime, but a bond of strength." Syra closed her eyes, the words sinking into her like the first breath after drowning. Kael squeezed her hand. The arbiter continued, her voice solemn. "Syra of the Luthari and Kael Riven of Earth, you are hereby named emissaries of this new alliance. You will stand as proof that unity is not fantasy, but living truth." Applause thundered from some quarters, while others remained silent, but it no longer mattered. The tide had turned. Later, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the endless stars, Kael turned to her. The desert still lived in his eyes, the memory of the moment he had found her broken in the sand. "You were never a weight, Syra," he said softly. "You were only waiting for someone to see your light." She leaned into him, her glow reflecting across his face, softening the scars of war. "And you carried me until I could walk again. Now we walk together." The stars stretched wide before them, countless and unclaimed. They were no longer soldier and exile, no longer broken and discarded. They were bridge builders, emissaries, sparks of something new. And as they stood, hand in hand, light in light, the galaxy shifted once more.